Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Saturday, June 15th. Hopefully, everybody is having a good day so far today. It is episode 17 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. As always, make sure to please like and subscribe. We appreciate all of your support. We've got a lot to break down today on the podcast. Lots of quarterback news, a massive contract given out to Trevor Lawrence the other day. We will break that down and get into a lot other stuff as well. As minicamp OTAs is all wrapped up, we now enter the final real dead period of the NFL offseason before training camp begins in July, and then it's really just full-on football from there. August preseason, and then the regular season shortly thereafter. DiMari, a lot to get into today. We got a big contract. We got some other news. How's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Kind of just want to start off with couldn't start my morning off better knowing I didn't have to watch a Boston Celtics trophy ceremony last night. So that's always a good thing. But yeah, we got a lot of talk regarding some contracts. Like you said, Trevor Lawrence got paid a huge contract yesterday, which caught my surprise. So kind of excited to see how some other contracts might line up. Talk a little bit about his. Talk about some other things we got going. So it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. And the Mavericks were able to keep it alive, 3-1, maybe a 3-0 comeback. We will see. Lots to get into today. We'll get to the Trevor Lawrence contract right off the bat. We'll also get into some Viking news as Sam Darnold will start as QB1 for the Vikings entering training camp. So it's really right now, it seems like it's his job to lose. We'll also get into the Aaron Rodgers situation, in my opinion, what has been a ridiculous overreaction by the national media. And we'll also break down Amari Cooper missing mandatory minicamp, holding out for a contract, which is a story that should be much larger, but it seems like the Aaron Rodgers story has taken over some of the NFL and now Trevor Lawrence as well. So we'll break down Amari Cooper a little bit later on, but we'll start with the Trevor Lawrence contract. This thing is massive. It is tying a league history as the highest contract in league history. He will tie Joe Burrow in terms of the 50 million or 55 million average annual value. It ties Joe Burrow for the highest among NFL quarterbacks, and it also matches the highest mark in NFL history. So there's only four other players rather that are making 50 million per year. Jared Goff, who signed his extension this offseason, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. Now Trevor Lawrence joins that company as well. It is a massive 5-year, $275 million contract. It includes $200 million guaranteed and one in guaranteed money and $142 million in fully guaranteed at signing. So just ridiculous amounts of money. These teams, they just throw out money like it's nothing at this point, especially to a player like Trevor Lawrence, who is not elite, is not in the conversation of the Joe Burrows of the world, not anywhere near the Lamar Jacksons or the Patrick Mahomeses or even the Josh Allens of the world. This is a guy that is not quite lived up to the number one overall pick billing. He's won one playoff game since coming into the league, and that one playoff game was against the Brandon Staley-led Los Angeles Chargers. And now this guy is getting 5 years, $275 million. Just ridiculous. I know you DM'd me yesterday and said we saw robbery, right? What was it? It was robbery and
robbery and Pride Day.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you're 100% correct. This is just crazy. And I mean, now this just completely resets the quarterback market because now other quarterbacks that are looking at money are going to point to Trevor Lawrence, similar to how a lot of people pointed at Daniel Jones and said, I'm better than that guy. I need more money than that. Now everyone's going to look at Trevor Lawrence and say, I'm 10 times better than him. You better give me this money. So this is crazy. What was your initial reaction to this?
Well, you started out pretty hot just saying he's not leading, all the other things. I was going to ease into it, but I guess we're starting off with a bang. But I agree. I mean, I don't want to hear the playoff wins. What does your playoff wins look like? How many Super Bowl rings do you have? I don't want to hear that crowd anymore whatsoever because now we're getting guys like Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence in this instance. Like we're giving guys humongous contracts just based off of the future possibilities of what they can do, while other quarterbacks graded off of what have they done. So not really going to get into that too much, but it was an insane overpay. Just even Jared Goff, but that's for another time as well. I just don't think anyone is worth that money yet besides Joe Burrow. Obviously, Mahomes isn't even making that much, but some contract reconstruction. But like I DM'd you yesterday, that was robbery in broad day. That contract really caught me by surprise. Like there's no way he's making that much money with one playoff win. Hasn't been close to what he's expected to be, or hasn't been expected to be since he got into the league. Last year, this team was 8-3 at like the half mark of the season and completely missed out on the playoffs, which he was injured for a portion of that, but he also was a key contributor in a portion of that, of why they didn't do anything. So, I mean, I guess good for him. He makes his money, but now you're talking about guys like Dak and, a few others who are looking for some contract extensions where they're probably licking their lips and it's like, if Trevor Lawrence got that and Jared Goff got that, I want 60. So I'm expecting that contract to not last too long. I really, now at this point, think Dak Prescott is going to get more than that. At first, I'm thinking he's going to act around the 53, 55 range due to Jared Goff getting what he got. But now with Trevor Lawrence just completely, you can say resetting the market, even though he's not getting paid more than the other guys. But since he is making the annual salary around what Burrow and Goff is making, I think Dak is definitely going to exceed that. We might be talking 58, 59 million. So thank you, Jacksonville Jaguars, for basically giving money to a guy who's not yet deserving and everyone else is about to feast off of it.
Yep. Even Tua as well. Tua turned the ball over, is about to get completely paid. Which,
nice contract.
Which, by all means, do that. I would love to see Tua get this amount of money because I think that's good for the AFC East if he makes this amount of money, because I don't think Tua is anywhere worth that. But, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the collapse last year. Not that Trevor Lawrence was 100% the reason why they collapsed. You talked about the injury, but this is a team that went 8-3. I've never known a team that went 8-3, lost 6 straight games, and then the couple months later, in June of that following offseason, to give that quarterback that was a reason you lost 6 straight games all this money. I've never seen that before. The collapse last year was a disaster. And in a way, I'm not saying that Doug Peterson's on the hot seat, but this is a huge year for Jacksonville. I don't think that they're going to enter a rebuild if they fall apart this year. But if they go out there this year and win 8 games again and miss the playoffs, like all of a sudden there starts to be some questions around the team, and there starts to be some questions around Trevor Lawrence if he goes out there and doesn't take another huge step this year. To me, this contract, and you kind of, I think you were mentioning how it seems like they're paying more for what you've done or what you're going to do than actually what you've done it with this contract. That's kind of the way it feels like. And you're playing a really risky game because Trevor Lawrence has not shown me enough, has not shown anybody enough that he is legitimately lived up to the number 1 overall pick billing, that he can legitimately go out there and outplay. Let's not even talk about getting to the playoffs, but in a playoff game, outplay a Patrick Mahomes, outplay a Lamar Jackson, a Joe Burrow, a Josh Allen, any of these guys. Trevor Lawrence isn't even on their level. He's not even the best. Like, this is what's crazy. He's not even the best quarterback in his division. He's not even the best quarterback in his division. And he is making $55 million a year, $275 million overall, obviously with the guaranteed money as well. Like, that's just crazy to me. It's crazy. And I can make the case that, we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago or about a month or two ago, how there's a chance, and maybe this is crazy, but there is a chance that at the end of this year, if the Jaguars, who, by the way, the AFC South is a lot better than it's been, there's no guarantee that they get to the playoffs, even with some of the additions they've made this offseason. But if the Jaguars go out there and win 8 games this year, and let's say the Colts and the Texans both make the playoffs, there's an argument that could be made in January that Anthony Richardson maybe has surpassed Trevor Lawrence. Like, there's an argument, and I know Anthony Richardson hasn't played much, and maybe that's crazy talk, but Trevor Lawrence has proven nothing in the NFL. Nothing. And he's making all this money, which is just ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy that's got 58 touchdowns in 3 years. And fine, you want to count his rookie year, not his fault. He had Urban Meyer. That was a disaster. Fine. But in the last 2 years, 2022 was very good. Last year, the interceptions were back up, 21 touchdowns to 14 picks. That's not a great ratio. It's certainly not a $200 million plus ratio. I mean, after the way, after the way last year went in Jacksonville, their future, it's not cloudy, I wouldn't say, but if things go wrong, like they have to make the playoffs this year, in my opinion. If they miss the playoffs this year and Trevor Lawrence goes out there and throws 20 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, like, what do you do? Am I right? That's 2 years, then you miss the playoffs. That's 3 of 4 since he's been drafted. I don't know.
Yeah, and a point I kind of want to throw in is also 2 years ago, this is also the same team, the year that they did make the playoffs, which what you didn't include in that is his first ever playoff appearance. I know they came back in this miraculous,
Brandon Staley,
27-0
thank you.
deficit. Brandon Staley, but if I'm correct, I think he threw 4 interceptions in the first half and just completely just brushed that under the rug. Like that's his first ever playoff outing. And that Chargers defense that I have watched the last few years has been it's just been a terrible defense. And they had him out there looking like Johnny Manziel when he was in Cleveland. Anywho, just this Jags team, they as a unit, they're just so overhyped. After that, like, okay, this team might be number 1 in the AFC. Like it's a great possibility. And like you just said, they're probably the third best in their division. I mean, Tennessee is just a Will Levis just being competent, throughout the year away from being the third best, moving Jacksonville to the worst in the division. Everyone has gotten so much better. You already mentioned it. I mean, even last year, Trevor Lawrence got outplayed by Gardner Minshew. We're not even talking about that. So I don't think it's crazy to say Anthony Richardson could surpass him this year when it comes to kind of QB ranking inside that division. But he's overpaid. And I know I got a few friends of mine that like to watch who are Jacksonville fans. So I'm sorry in advance that we're just telling the truth. But I'm going to let you catch the heat here, catch Lynn, the graphic that we said we were going to bring up during this topic.
Yeah, so there's a couple. One of these is Trevor Lawrence versus Daniel Jones. 50 starts through the first 50 career starts. Their numbers are very similar. We've talked about Daniel Jones being what's the saying? I guess a poster child for like contracts in the NFL. Quarterbacks say, look at Daniel Jones, look at the monies he's making. I got to make this money. Trevor Lawrence, like we mentioned right out of the gate, is entering that same territory. Daniel Jones got a better passer rating, better touchdown to interception ratio, and the same amount of yards per attempt as Trevor Lawrence. Like they are literally the same quarterback statistically. All Trevor Lawrence has over him is a better
long blonde hair.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the golden locks. Win-loss record, pass and rushing yards, he has more. And then the completion percentage. Which, by the way, the completion percentage ain't even that far. It's 0.3 more. He's got, 3% more, right? Or 0.3? I don't know. I'm terrible at math. Was that 0.3? Yeah. 63.8? Yeah.
Nothing. It's nothing. They're identical. It's the same.
Yeah, it's this. So the same, let's just say, same yards per attempt, same completion percentage. All right, Trevor's got the more passing and rushing yards. Fine. Daniel Jones got the better passer rating. Fine. And, I mean, their win-loss record is separated by a tie. Daniel Jones, let's say that tie's a win. They pretty much have the same win-loss record. Same quarterback. One's making $225 million. He's the $275 million. He's the future. The other making way too much money too, but not as much. And then there's another stat too. This is going back a little bit to the first 40 career starts. Eerily similar to Mac Jones, who's now his backup. I mean, I'm just joking. This is a crazy statement. Is Trevor Lawrence even the best quarterback on his roster? I'm just kidding. On this team. That is not true. He's better than Mac Jones. Mac Jones is awful. Mac Jones fell off after this graphic, but yeah, I mean, look, through the first 40 career starts, I know we're going back a little bit, but it just shows you that Trevor Lawrence for a while here was right in line with these quarterbacks that aren't any good. I mean, if I'm a Jaguars fan, I don't like this personally. I don't like this. I wouldn't like this. Extending him's fine. Giving him this amount of money, he hasn't proven anything. He's proven nothing in the NFL. And you talked about the 4 interceptions that he threw in that wild card game, right? You go back to last year when they blew that 8-3 record. You go to look at some of the games that they lost down that stretch. Cleveland, they lost 31-27. In that game, he threw 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. You also go and look at the last game of the year when they lost by 8 to the Titans to officially be eliminated. It was a win-and-in scenario. He threw 2 interceptions that game, 2 touchdowns. The week before, he threw 1 touchdown, 2 picks. So in his final 4 games last year, Trevor Lawrence threw 7 of his 14 interceptions came in the last 4 games. When they needed him most to make the playoffs, he threw half of his interceptions in December. December football is the most important part of the season, other than January once the playoffs start. But you needed him most in December, and he didn't deliver. And that earns you a contract. I guess who knew you have to be who knew being average at your job? If only in regular everyday life you could be average at your job and just get paid $275 million,
Tell me about it, but Jaguars obviously have a lot of money to waste. They built a new stadium, which is not going to fill up anyways. No. And now Trevor Lawrence, so I guess got money to flush away to the city of Jacksonville. So more power to him.
You know what this feels like? I don't know if this is right. But this just feels like a little bit of I don't know if it's a desperation move, but Jacksonville, their franchise history, it's not pleasant, I would say. They had, they never won a Super Bowl. They're a newer franchise, right? I think they first year was 1995, I believe, or something around there. They had that one year where they got to the conference title game, as we remember, with Blake Bortles. That was the crazy Nick Foles, Case Keenum, Blake Bortles, Tom Brady Final Four. Just 3 quarterbacks that have absolutely no reason they should be in the Final Four, and then Tom Brady. As we know, Nick Foles, of course, ended up going on to win that. But they lost that game. They had that one year. Then you go to the year they had 2022 where they barely beat Chargers. They did, but then they lost to Kansas City. They haven't really had anything over the last. I think looking at the Pro Football Reference page, they've only had 2 playoff berths in the last since 2008. I think it feels just to me a little bit like a desperation move of trying to lock down a guy that the franchise can get behind, jersey sales, just trying to have a legitimate face of the franchise, which this team really hasn't had in a while or even ever. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm looking into it too much, but that's kind of what it feels like. That I know Maurice Jones-Drew there for a while was kind of the, I guess, maybe face or the big name, but maybe this is them kind of we got a quarterback, first overall pick. Let's lock him up. We don't want to, a couple years from now, make ourselves look bad if he moves on and we drafted him number 1 overall. I don't know. I just think they jumped the gun. I think they got a little desperate, and I think it's going to come back to bite them. Because if things don't go right this year, I think Doug Peterson's probably gone, and you're looking at a 3rd coach in 4 years. I don't know. Another stat here too. Turnovers. Oh, sorry. But
you're good. This is important. This is about to go perfectly right to my next point. So I think you're right. I 100% agree where it's like they jumped the gun, because that guy there at the bottom right there, who's apparently a turnover machine throughout the nation, that 43 turnovers doesn't look crazy to me. 15 of those came in one season, by the way, if you wanted to know, and he just completely bounced back. But anyways, we talked about Tua, we talked about that. I think in a way Jacksonville knows those 2 are probably going to get a decent, nice size contract. Yep. Let's go ahead and lock Trevor Lawrence up right now, because if we wait until after Dak and Tua gets a contract, if Trevor doesn't play that great, we still may have to sign him to a long-term, bigger extension if we don't like what's coming out of the draft. And also, you're not guaranteed to get anything out of the draft, a quarterback out of the draft that will instantly step in and find success, gel with the team, all those type of things. So
Yeah.
I think they kind of felt it was in their best interest. I know he hasn't been great. Let's go ahead and sign him now. Let's not wait until the other extensions happen. And that way, so when Dak gets his, and then Tua gets his, and just say Mahomes gets an extension as well, just spread out some cap space, it won't look too bad at that time. Like, hey, we signed him for 55. You got guys making 60 plus. We signed him at the perfect time. But again, like both of us mentioned, Jacksonville are looking at what he can possibly do, what might come out of this, instead of what has he done. So again, it's overpay. I necessarily don't get it, but for the sake of him trying to sign as soon as possible, I get it. Would I have given him 55? Absolutely not. 50, 51, maybe 53 at most. But what he's making right now compared to the other guys who he's getting paid around the same, what they've done compared to what he's done, is robbery and bribery. Because there's no way he got that contract.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's the risk you're taking, is like, it's the unknown. They're paying for what they hope he can be, that he can bounce back and have, that 2022 season he had where he threw 25 touchdowns and had 8 picks. They're hoping he can do that again, where he's a potentially 30-plus touchdown passer with maybe 9 interceptions and in the MVP conversation and well over 4,000 yards and all these great things and getting into the playoffs and winning. But that to me too is just, I mentioned this earlier, at the end of the day, like, I just don't think, and we talked about this last week, so I'm not going quite up against the point of, don't want to completely go against what we were making the point last week about how, playoff wins and all that stat, it's not always just a quarterback stat, because everybody's got to be involved, but a quarterback is certainly a big part of it, and he's not elite. I mean, we talked about this, like, we talked about this last week, right? Top 5 quarterbacks. We talked about CJ Stroud with Rodgers. I mean, is Trevor even a top? Where does Trevor stand right now? If you had to think, right? You have, let's say just Stroud's top 5 last week. We'll start with that. Was Mahomes, Lamar, himself, Stroud, obviously, Dak, and Hurts. That was his top 5. So, I mean, after that, it would probably be like Burrow, Allen. Let's say no particular order. They're just 6 and 7. Is Burrow and Allen, and then
I'm taking Tua over Trevor Lawrence
Trevor.
now.
So you put Trevor at what, 8?
Oh, no,
or no, Tua at 8?
I'm taking Tua over Trevor. So
Okay,
that's another one you can throw in.
I'd take Goff over Trevor. I would take Jordan
Absolutely.
Love over Trevor. That's 10. I would take. You can. I think, yeah, Nate. You can name easily 10 quarterbacks right off the dome. Kirk Cousins. I would take him probably over Trevor.
Kirk Cousins. I'm going to be 6 saying this. I'll take Brock Purdy over Trevor right now.
Yeah, Stafford.
Yeah.
I mean, you can name about 13 quarterbacks probably that you would take over Trevor Lawrence. Depending on how this year goes, I might walk out of this year and say, I want Anthony Richardson over Trevor Lawrence.
Baker Mayfield can be another one.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield could be as well. Last year CJ Stroud was, and we could get to Darnold. Like last year, CJ Stroud was that guy. He was so good last year, as we all know. And I remember during the season, there was like a discussion about how many teams out there there was probably 20 plus teams in the NFL where if you asked them, would you want CJ Stroud right now over your current quarterback? Most of them would have said yes, like probably 80% of the NFL. I feel like Anthony Richardson could have that year where he just breaks out. And if you go around to every single NFL team, all 32 NFL teams, and you ask them, would you want Anthony Richardson as your quarterback? I have a feeling by the end of this year, there will probably be like 25 of them that say, yeah, I would, because he's young, what he showed. Because I remember that was kind of the case last year. Like, there's not, my point is, like, Trevor Lawrence, if you go around every 32 NFL team, there is not many that would say, yeah, I would rather Trevor Lawrence. Maybe like the Browns, because Watson's a disaster. Obviously, New England probably would. There's certain teams that would, but not many. Not many. He's mid. Fair assessment, right?
Mid gets you paid.
Yeah.
You can see.
Now, to the people out there, this isn't all going to be bad. Here is one good stat about Trevor Lawrence. Most pass yards in first 3 seasons. He's 5th. This is all time. So,
but
There is
They
that
told me
stat.
that told me stats don't matter. It's only what you do in the playoffs. So that graphic
That is
is
true.
therefore kind of just invalid. You're just throwing it up there for nothing. The guy
Mm.
on the top blew a 27 point lead. The guy at the bottom put them in a 27-point deficit. So I mean, I don't know. I'm just being what I've told is that stats don't matter. It's what you do in the playoffs and what you don't
Which
do. So
Trevor Lawrence
therefore,
hasn't done anything in the playoffs either.
that graphic isn't. Don't get too hyped about that graphic, Jaguars fans, because he threw 4 picks
You know
in a
what's funny
playoff
about
game.
this graphic
Your home
is
turf.
like number 1 and 5, not much, but 2, 3, 4, like those guys you could respect them. Luck, of course, the injury
Yeah.
problems derailed him. Peyton Manning's one of the all-time greats, and Joe Burrow is one of the best going right now. But then you got Herbert and Trevor Lawrence who haven't done a whole lot. Weird, but anyway, so that's the Trevor Lawrence. You better bank on Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. Those guys having a big year for him, because if not, this contract's gonna be very ugly very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So heading on over to Minnesota, Sam Darnold. Hey, Sam Darnold, is he the next highest paid quarterback in the NFL? Maybe. Who knows? Sam Darnold looks to be the quarterback one, QB1 going into training camp. So doesn't mean he will be QB1 this season, but right now he's got the inside track. Right now he is leading over JJ McCarthy. He will enter camp as the number 1 quarterback. So basically it is his job to lose. Minnesota's now popped up in the news a little bit over the last couple weeks with the Justin Jefferson contract. Now Sam Darnold, and JJ McCarthy looks like will be sitting behind him. So I don't think this is too much of a surprise, to be honest. I think JJ McCarthy probably could benefit from sitting a little bit. I mean, not trying to be funny, but is sitting behind Sam Darnold the most beneficial thing? I don't know. I mean, Sam Darnold hasn't done a whole lot in his career. He's benefited, he's been sitting the last couple years, which has probably helped him. So we'll see. And I've always said this as a Jet fan, I'm still rooting for Sam. Sam's a little bit different than Zach. I feel like Sam, the organization, ruined more than so Zach. Zach Wilson was just terrible. Sam Darnold, I thought, legitimately had talent that they just ruined him with the hiring of Gaze. They gave him no weapons. They gave Zach everything. They gave him Garrett Wilson. They gave him Breece Hall. They gave him pretty much everything he could ask for, and he couldn't do anything. With Darnold, they gave him nothing. Chris Hogan was his number 1 receiver during the COVID year. Chris Hogan. That's all you need to know. So still rooting for him, still hoping to see if he could do well. What was your thoughts on this? Do you think he is going to continue as the number 1 quarterback? Does this make you change your tone on the Vikings at all, that Darnold may get the starting gig here? And I think it's going to be something where Darnold, will get the opportunity to start. If he does well, they'll keep riding with him. If he doesn't, then they'll turn over to JJ McCarthy. It's also a good opportunity for Darnold, because let's just say Darnold starts this year. He's obviously not the future in Minnesota. He could get the chance to potentially go elsewhere, get a contract, another team, start somewhere else. So it's still kind of that prove it stage for Darnold.
I do look at the Vikings a lot differently now, knowing he is going to be the starter, like more confidence in them going into the season. And so I can't remember who it just happened with, but it was very recently. I'm just there would be a career revival where he goes over to Minnesota for a year or two, plays pretty well, and then somebody's willing to take the risk on him and be a starter, and then he works out. I mean, he has the weapons in Minnesota to do it. Just he has to be careful with the ball, don't put the team in bad situations. But with Jordan Jefferson and Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, the ball too, you have so much talent around you where not trying to be funny, but you have to be Brock Purdy. You don't have to go out and throw for 4,500 yards, 38 touchdowns. Like, we just need you to be good enough to get us some points on the board and trusting your playmakers, trusting your weapons, let them do the work. And that's all they need from them. So for Minnesota, I think they made the right call. You don't want to throw McCarthy right in there right away, especially with Darnold, who, like you said, has set a lot. But as you're sitting, you are still learning. So it's not like, he's been out of the league or anything like that. So for him to kind of come in, you set a few years, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from the guys in front of you. Now you're on a team loaded with weapons around you. I think it's going to be great for him. I think they're going to give him at least 7 to 8 games to kind of prove what he can do. Now they're sitting in a bad situation, 7 to 8 games in, or whenever their bye week is, say week 10. Week 10, they're going into the bye week, and he's not looking too good. Things aren't looking too good. Then I think they switch over to JJ. But if we're talking about a Vikings team that may be 5-4 going to that bye week, whatever the case is, still fighting for a playoff spot, there's a chance he will play the year out as the starter. So I think he's going to have a good year. So I'm not saying he's really going to light up, the stat sheet, but I do think they will at least be competitive enough to be playing meaningful football in December.
Yeah. If they get their offense figured out and Darnold is just solid, you kind of mentioned they have to be Purdy. I mean, it's true. This Vikings team's loaded on offense. TJ Hawkinson, you added Aaron Jones, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, just studs all over the ball. All you have to kind of be is a game manager, take what the defense is giving you, get your ball, get the ball in your playmakers' hands, and allow them to do the rest. Just the biggest concern with me has always been about like Minnesota's defense in terms of what they can accomplish this year. I have some questions about their defense. I mean, I always go back to 2022 playoffs when they let Daniel Jones go into their own building and dice them up. Like, that's just unacceptable. So ever since that, it feels like their defense has been on a downwards trajectory. But, I think you look at their schedule, I feel for they got a rough break out of the start. Like, their schedule to open up is brutal. They get the Giants, which is winnable, San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, Jets, bye week, Detroit, Rams, Colts, and then the Jaguars as well. Like, that is, you're going to need, maybe that's part of it too, is they don't want to throw potentially JJ McCarthy right into the fire against San Francisco's defense in week 2, against on the road in Green Bay. But this is a tall task. Like, if Darnold does, whoever the quarterback is, I was looking this morning. I didn't realize it until this morning how difficult their schedule is. If they don't get good quarterback play, it's funny. You mentioned 5-4. If they get good quarterback play, they could be 5-4. They could be around that. But if they get bad quarterback play, this Vikings team could easily be staring at 4 wins.
That was generous. I was going to say 3 or 2.
Yeah.
Oh, you said all year? All year. Yes. All year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
I mean, the first 5 weeks is terrible. You probably beat the Giants 1-0. Okay. San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, Jets. There's nothing. Now, I will say that Jets game's in London, and you never know about those games. Those games are always weird. However the team, it's not even the team that plays better. It's whatever team adjusts to the time better. Because you always see there's always one team that is just slow. They're just tired. You could just tell they haven't adjusted. Like last year, the Jaguars beat the Bills. The Bills, you could just tell they were slow all game. Yeah. So maybe they get the Jets there sleeping a little bit in London. But, I mean, and I think, too, a lot has to do with their division. I mean, all of their 6 division matchups are going to be difficult because Chicago no longer shouldn't be a pushover anymore. So, but I'm rooting for Darnold. Any chance Darnold, I know we're looking into this, but just for the heck of it, any chance Darnold has a huge year? Let's say they win 10 games, go to the playoffs, and Darnold has a massive year. They bring him back and come to find out 27-year-old Sam Darnold's the answer and not JJ McCarthy.
There's a possibility. I mean, with just the stretch of games that you just discussed, 10 games feels like the Super Bowl for them. Like, that is huge. But I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I literally just kind of opened up with it where this could be a year where he comes out and he proves something, and then he goes into next year and just say he has a good next year. And then they're just like, all right, well, hold on. Like, you might be the answer. You might be the guy. $57 million. Congratulations, Sam Darnold. That could happen. It is a great possibility because this could be a career revival for him. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But I don't think it's crazy to think that it could. I mean, NFL, we see a lot of crazy things every year. We just seen Joe Flacco come off his couch and look like a top 8 quarterback for a good portion of the year. So I'm not saying it's impossible. It's slim, but chances are never zero.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team last year that won 7 games with Kirk Cousins being out a good majority of them. I mean, they won, 1, 2, like 3 games without Kirk Cousins, which isn't much, but they went
and one of them
7
was
and 10
the
with her.
49ers.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. You know what's crazy? It is wild to me. Kind of age yourself a little bit. Darnold's entering his 7th year in the NFL. That is just crazy. It really is. I mean, I remember his first game against the Lions. We thought we had our answer after that first game, and then everything went downhill from there. But it's crazy. He's already entering his 7th season, and this is his 4th team. Giants or the Jets, Panthers, San Fran, Minnesota. Who's next? We'll see. But anyway, Darnold, QB1. Now we move on to Aaron Rodgers, current QB1 of the New York Jets. This has been kind of a crazy week for the Jets for no real reason. I guess I'll start with you before I give my thoughts because I may rant a little bit. What was your reaction to this as like a non-Jet fan? What was your reaction to Rodgers not being at 2 days mandatory minicamp?
Did
Or I
it ever
guess the
come out
media
what?
too.
Oh, did it ever come out the reason he wasn't in attendance?
No, it didn't. It just said something that was important to him. I think his way Saul labeled it. Or it's like personal reasons, I guess. That's probably biggest reason. Probably
I mean, I just feel it's so blown out of proportion, and I don't know for what reason. I mean, this isn't a rookie or a second-year guy that's, supposed to be the starter and is still kind of trying to gain the locker room and just like, okay, well, 2 days of practice, I'm not showing up. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's Aaron Rodgers, a seasoned vet, locker room. He already has a locker room. I know there are some things I think you were telling me that they claim he's a locker room cancer and some guys in the locker room don't care for him. But if you saw the same Hard Knocks I saw last year, that does not seem like the case with Jets and Rodgers. So, I mean, I just feel like everything's so blown out of proportion. And I do get at the end of the day, it's kind of like, all right, you're the starting quarterback. This is your job. When you put your pen to paper, you need to be here. But at the end of the day, these people are more than just athletes. He's more than just a guy in a helmet and jersey and shoulder pad. He has a life also. So whatever the reasoning was, it was important to him for his reasons for him to know. So, I mean, he didn't ditch practice and ditch the team for a weekend. We're not in the middle of the season, playoff stretch. I'm skipping practice because, I want to go race horses. Something came up. He had to go take care of it and deal with it. It is what it is. Like, people call off work because their stomach hurts. Aaron Rodgers didn't show up to work because he had to deal with something. It is what it is. If that's not even your starting quarterback, like, why does it matter? So I think everyone and the media is looking too much into it. But for the Jets, I guess this is the way of saying, like, hey, we made it. Everything we do, every little move is going to be under a microscope. And we're going to be judged for it. But I don't think it's a crime Aaron Rodgers didn't show up for 2 days of practice. I mean, it's life. Things happen. Life comes to things come up unexpected. It is what it is. I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even if he was like, I don't know the reason, but the reason to me doesn't even mean a whole lot. Like you said, whatever he's doing, it's June. It's mini camp in June. For all we know, he's always said he wanted to go to Egypt. For all we know, Rodgers right now could be in Egypt on an ayahuasca retreat or, I don't know, smoking pot in the middle of Egypt. Whatever the heck it is, it doesn't matter to me. It's ridiculous how blown out of proportion this has become. When Rodgers came here from the Jets, my biggest concern, and one of the reasons why I've always admitted to this, because I'm not going to backtrack on my takes. I've always said this, when my biggest concern with Rodgers was when he came here was how he would do with the young guys, how he would do in the locker room, because we've always heard over the years from his time in Green Bay how he sometimes didn't connect with the young players, how sometimes he wasn't great in the locker room. He was kind of a me guy, didn't take blame, all that stuff. And that was one of my concerns because he was entering a very young locker room that the Jets have. It is still relatively young. I mean, it's getting older now with that 2022 draft class of Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, and all those guys entering year 3 now, and will be soon looking for contracts after this year. But he ever since walking into that building, he has proven everybody wrong. He has embraced the Jets. He has tried his best to make this organization look good. For years, the Jets have embarrassed themselves in so many stupid and dumb ways. They can't get out of their own way. They've been a PR disaster for years, from hiring new coaches every other year to different quarterbacks to all these different things. And what Rodgers has done since coming here he's embraced being a Jet, and he's embraced trying to change the narrative, change the way people view this organization, from viewing it from a lens of dysfunction and embarrassment and no talent and all that stuff, to viewing it as a contender and a team that can win games and a talented roster and all that stuff. Like last year, he made it to every single OTA. He was at all the spring workouts, did everything. And then go into training camp, obviously all the training camp practices, goes into the season, tears his Achilles. He could have easily, and a lot of people forget about this, and I'll say this too. I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I've never seen an athlete's injury celebrated as much as Aaron Rodgers. I've never seen it before in my life. I've never have. It's wild to me. I know the press hates him. I know the media hates him. But whether you hate a guy or you love a guy, seeing one of the best players in any sporting league, whether it's NBA, NHL, whatever you watch, soccer, cricket, whatever the heck you watch, anytime a star player from that league goes down, it's bad for the sport. I mean, look at all the primetime games fans were robbed of last year because we had to watch Zach Wilson instead of Aaron Rodgers, Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian instead of Aaron Rodgers. You know, that's bad for the league. But fans, for some reason, liked it. They enjoyed it. But Rodgers, when he tore his Achilles, could have easily just retired and left the Jets a void at quarterback. Or he could have tore his Achilles and done all the rehab on his own, not show up to anything this offseason, not show up to the mandatory minicamp, and then come into training camp and say, let's roll, I'm ready to go, not having, but then having to build chemistry in 1 month to get ready for the season. Instead, what he did was he came back last year in December. He worked with the scout team. He risked his own body. He risked his health. That's another thing I will never understand, too, when he came back and people called him selfish for coming back. He was just being a me guy. Like, how are you being selfish for coming back to practice if you're risking an injury? This is a guy that would have played last year if the Jets were in the conversation for the playoffs. If they had competent quarterback play, he would have played again. And he risked his body, wanted to be back with the team. He came back to Jersey, he came back to the facility to be around the team, be a leader, help in the quarterback room. He could have easily just went home like every other player does when they tear their ACL or tear their Achilles or whatever, have a season-ending injury, and disappeared. But he came back. He's been at every single practice this offseason. Now he misses 2 practices in June, and people are blowing up about it. And if mandatory minicamp was so important, then why did the Jets cancel it last year if it's so important? And then number 2, why was it only 2 days instead of 3 days this year? If mandatory minicamp is so important, why have over the last 2 years it has slightly been scaled back? When we sit down, when I sit down, when all these other talking heads sit down to watch Jets Niners on Monday night, if you sit there and you think about, oh man, I wonder if Rodgers missing that practice in June is going to affect them on how they come out in this game, you need to seek medical attention. That's all I'm going to say, because that's just ridiculous. It's crazy talk. And nobody talked about 2 years ago when Tom Brady missed 11 days of training camp. Training camp, much more important. Missed 11 days of training camp. Nobody said anything. It was just a small headline in the news. Rodgers misses 2 practices in June. In shorts, by the way. Shorts and T-shirts. 2 practices in June. And everybody's saying, oh, I'm taking the under on wins for the Jets this year. Everyone's saying, oh, this is a terrible look. He has done everything right since coming over here. He has attended every single practice. He came back from the torn Achilles, practiced with the team, tried to come back onto the field. All of this stuff, and people still go after him. I mean, there is not much he can do. If he missed all of OTAs and mandatory minicamp, okay, then it'd be a story. He missed 2 days. 2 days. He's been there since March, April, and missed 2 days. And he was there Monday too. Like Monday, they had their media day. He was there. He took a physical, but he wasn't there for Tuesday, Wednesday. Like, what? It really is. It's wild. It's wild. I mean, and like I said, wherever he's gone, whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. You know, the way that too, like the local media around me, there's been a lot of people saying that the Jets could have handled this situation differently. How they could have made an announcement that Aaron Rodgers was not going to be here. But if they did that, then people would have made fun of the Jets for giving him like, you know, the special treatment and saying, oh, look at the Jets. They're treating Aaron Rodgers so much better than the other players or whatever. Like at the end of the day, it is an unexcused absence. You need to treat everybody in that locker room the same, because if you had Aaron Rodgers do a press conference, or you had to make a big statement about Aaron Rodgers not being there at minicamp, then you'd have to do that for every single player. You have to set a precedent. So I don't know. That's
I do want to chime back in. It's funny that you said when it comes down to week 1, is it going to come back to him missing these practices? So I did just want to throw in, you know, if it's week, you know, 15 through 18, they're fighting for a playoff spot, whether they get in or don't get in, those 2 practices will be the reason why the Jets miss or make the playoffs. Because, I mean, especially when you only have 1 practice every month. They had 2 in June, and he just missed both in June. But, you know, 1 practice day a month from now until the rest of the season ends, that's a bad look for Aaron Rodgers. That is absolutely ridiculous. It's uncalled for. It's unprofessional, and they should trade him to teach him a lesson. Because, I mean, season starts in September. Why are you missing June practices?
Yeah. Who wants to see Rodgers anyway? Guy. I just purchased my Tyrod jersey earlier today.
That's actually a great move. I mean, Aaron Rodgers won't be there during after the trade deadline, and it's just so ridiculous. That's just such a selfish player. I don't care if he tried to come back on a torn Achilles last year and help them get to the playoffs. I don't care if he taught or attempted to teach Zach Wilson how to play football, which is one thing you can't even do in this world.
He should just win an award for that.
Walter Payton Man of the Year award for
dealing
with Zach Wilson.
He came back to the facility when he could have been out in California doing his own thing to try and help Zach Wilson. I mean,
God, I wonder what was more painful, the recovery from the Achilles or watching film every Monday and just seeing Zach Wilson throw footballs around.
You know what's funny? I ask myself too that sometimes, like when Rodgers went down, like when I heard about the Rodgers news the next morning, like the pain was so bad, but it wasn't even pain. It was just like disbelief. I'll be honest. It wasn't really pain. It was disbelief. It was just like shock. But like watching Zach is just, I think watching Zach Wilson is probably worse than seeing like a star player go down. It's just excruciating. It's excruciating. It was so bad. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. It's Aaron Rodgers. Everybody's gonna make a big stink out of it. And I gotta say, Colin Cowherd, he made a statement the other day. He was on his radio show or his talk show, whatever, The Herd with Colin Cowherd. He said that this is what happens to teams that have a coach with a losing record and a new GM. Which I don't know what he was taking, because yes, they do have a coach with a losing record, but Joe Douglas is not a new GM. Joe Douglas was hired in 2019. Last I checked, GMs that are hired in 2019 are not new. He's been here for 5.5 years, entering his 6th season. I wouldn't say that's a new GM, but been here for half a decade. Don't know if that's new. Just me. I don't know.
I don't know why you wasted your time listening to that guy anyways. You could have just saved yourself so much stress than to ever put him on your TV, your radio, whatever it is. Just
some of his takes are just terrible.
All of his takes are terrible.
And you know what's funny? He'll just say things that are completely wrong. Like they're not even factually right. Like he'll just blurt out numbers or players on teams that like not even correct. It's not even like a bad take. It's just simply false. Like him saying that they have a new GM, that's not even bad. It's just false. He's not new. He's been here for 6 years.
New
I
to
don't
winning? I don't know. I don't know what he
I
meant by
don't
that.
know.
It could have been. We don't know.
He'll probably he would say, this is what happens when you have a young quarterback, a new head coach, and a new GM. Young quarterback. Yep. Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old. That's young. Last I checked, that's
Can't
young.
rely on a rookie wide receiver and Garrett Wilson. Just not quite yet.
Yeah, he would. Oh, he flip flops so much. He flip flops. It's crazy. He flip flops like crazy. Anyway,
It's
on
not
to
that
what
fun.
should be a bigger story. Amari Cooper held out of minicamp. Haven't really heard much about it because Aaron Rodgers has been taking over the league with this nonsense. But Amari Cooper held out. Year number 3 coming up for Cleveland. Deal potentially getting done. What are your thoughts on Cooper? And is this something Browns fans should be concerned about?
Whew. I mean, if only he was worth like a 5th, 6th round draft pick. If I was Dallas, I would go get him right now. But receivers don't go for that these days, you know.
Nope.
Not a guy like Amari Cooper, definitely either. For Cleveland, I am a little worried. If Cleveland fans, I would be a little worried. I mean, this is the guy. The last few years, I know his numbers aren't necessarily jumping off the page, but his 2 years in Cleveland, he has had 1,100 or more yards both years, 5 touchdowns last year, 9 touchdowns his first year in Cleveland. So, I mean, obviously, he is the leader of that wide receiver group. You're trying to get Deshaun Watson going. And I know this is going to be a little contradicting because we were just talking about how mandatory minicamp does not matter, especially in June. But now in this case, I'm going to say it matters just for the fact of contract purposes. So it's going to contradict itself a little bit. If I'm Cleveland fans, I think I want him there, and I think he needs to be there just because Deshaun Watson has not been what he has been. And then you get Jerry Jeudy over, so you need to build that chemistry and that timing, that trust with your quarterback, all those type of things. And again, we are in June. You do have all of training camp. You still got July. You still have August, and then you still have all of the season. But the part where I'm saying is important. He needs to be there, and he should be there, is because we kind of see how you can say, I don't want to say ego because Amari Cooper doesn't come off as an ego guy. He's never been an ego guy. But you can kind of see how guys change when they're playing for a new contract. Like you can either get that, like, all right, I'm going to play amazing. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a great year. And I'm going to prove that you should pay me. Or you're going to have guys that's kind of just like, you know, to hell with being here. I'm kind of going to get through this season, hopefully get traded, you know, before the trade deadline. And if not, it is what it is, and I'll be gone next season, which also, again, Amari Cooper doesn't come off as that type of guy. But just for Cleveland, like you want to have your guy locked up. You want to have him at practice, building that chemistry with your quarterback, especially when over the last few years, like you went from the laughing stock of the NFL to a very respected team, like you are a team to look out for. So it definitely sucks for Brown fans to not have your guy at mandatory minicamp, and Cleveland should lock him up ASAP, especially on until later to say this. I guess I'm going to just say it now, especially with news just now coming out 20 minutes
T.
ago of
Higgins.
T. Higgins. Yes. So you want to lock him up before T. Higgins gets his contract, most definitely. But Amari Cooper he'll be back. He'll be ready for the season. So it's not nothing too concerning, but it sucks when you're trying to build that chemistry with your guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you know, nothing against Deshaun Watson, but he needs all the help he can get. You know, he needs his number one receiver there. Obviously Joe Flacco maybe could do without him because it's, you know, Joe Flacco, but Deshaun Watson needs all the help he can get. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned Cleveland, you know, the way people view that organization now is completely different. You know, this was a laughing stock. You mentioned it. Kevin Stefanski's taken over. They've been so much better. Their defense is unbelievable. in a really tough division, they've been able to look so good. And you get Chubb back. You're getting Chubb back as well. Like, you want this team to be full strength. You want everything available for Watson entering this year. You don't want to have this Cooper thing lingering over you going into camp. And then if something went really bad where he's held out completely, you would then be left with a duo at receiver of Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore, which is a lot less threatening than Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore all together. And Amari Cooper potentially could be, too, a big reason for a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who was trying to be a one in Denver, never really worked out, but as a number 2, as a number 3 option where Cooper takes some of the attention away from him could be crucial for him. And that's something, I think brings value too to really good receivers. Not only what they can do as pass catchers themselves, but how much attention they take off of their teammates. And I think that's huge. That's a huge aspect to a great receiver. And Amari Cooper is one of the elite ones in the league. You look at his numbers last year, he was 10th in yards with 1,250, 72 receptions. Him and Flacco had a couple of those huge connections. His yards per reception last year was crazy, 17.4, which was career high. His average throughout his career has been 14.2. And last year, it's 17.4 yards per catch. So just crazy stuff. 9,000 yards, well over 9,000 yards in his career, 60 touchdowns. He's had 6 seasons of over 1,000 yards. 2 of those came in Dallas. 2 of those came in Oakland, the then Oakland Raiders. And 2 of them have now come in Cleveland in his first 2 years. So, and yes, more receiver news. Like you mentioned, T. Higgins. This is massive, by the way. Massive, because I was looking at the Bengals as a team that could potentially miss out on the playoffs if they didn't have T. Higgins. Because you would then look at their roster. They lost Joe Mixon. They have Zach Moss. If they didn't have T. Higgins, you would literally have, and Mike Gesicki's their tight end. All right, not great. You would literally have Jamar Chase, and that's it. That's it. I did draft Jermaine Burton. You have Trenton Irwin, who's been around a little bit. But, I mean, you've got an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow who can do a good amount probably with less. But I don't know what changed, but he finally signed the tag. Something must have changed, but he's there. So, AFC North.
Oh, man.
Loaded.
Well, just before I even get into Higgins, back to Amari Cooper. I don't know how big you're on TikTok, but have you ever seen the trend where it's just like, why are you crying? And you're just like, it's just a guy you miss so much, and it's just one of your favorite players from one of your teams. I'm looking at still got Amari Cooper stats pulled up here, trying not to tear up, and I'm just Dallas for 4 years. Those are great 4 years. What it could have been with CeeDee Lamb becoming what he has became, and then you still got Amari Cooper there. Life was good. And then we traded him away for a Sharpie and a McDonald's large fry.
You think if you guys still had Amari Cooper, oh my gosh. That would be disgusting.
Oh, the tears. That was a good time. If we still had Amari Cooper, I mean, my confidence in that team would be at an all-time high, like every single year. I don't care about how the playoffs have shaped up. Actually, I lied. I would care about how the playoffs shaped up because I knew it would be so much different. Like that defense, you take last year's defense, and then you take, let's just say, like, I don't want to say 2020 because Dak was hurt. You take 2019. You take 2019. I think that might be the year where he threw for 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I could be wrong, or at least I don't remember exactly. I know he had a stretch between 18 and like 21 where that was his numbers. But just say Dak Prescott from this year. You take Amari Cooper with CeeDee Lamb this year, Dallas's defense for this year. That team right there that team's gone far. There's no reason why they're not 14-3, maybe 15-2, and winning the Super Bowl. That is how good that team could have possibly been. But again, thanks to Jerry Jones shipping them off for literally nothing, and now he's in Cleveland, just elevating that team to levels that we didn't expect. But anyways, miss Amari Cooper. It is what it is. Life happens. But yeah, to D. Higgins, that is a big deal. I mean, a healthy Joe Burrow, and I feel like I have this discussion every day with guys that work when we're ranking quarterbacks and this and that. A healthy Joe Burrow, I don't care what anyone says. A healthy Joe Burrow is number 2 to me when it comes to quarterback ranking. I mean,
yeah, I've always said that.
Yeah, and you said it last week. We talk about the injuries and we talk about this, talking about that. This is the only guy I know. If you ask me, genuinely puts fear in the heart of Chiefs fans. Chiefs can play anyone else, and they are just not worried because they got Mahomes. Until Cincinnati, Joe Shiesty, Joe Bird walks into Arrowhead, and Chiefs fans are nervous because that's the impact that he has. So, I mean, T. Higgins being back, Jamar Chase is obviously Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, and now you get Jermaine Burton, who wasn't, and I know we talked about this like a long time ago. This was like pre-draft, where we're like, this feels like the first time in a long time a Bama receiver comes out and just doesn't move the needle. Like they're kind of just another guy flowing along with the pack. Jermaine Burton steps in that as that number 3 option, who is more of a, Tyler Boyd was a possession type of guy, where Jermaine Burton is a let me take the top off type of guy. I'm going to run past you, and we're throwing bombs down the field. Jermaine Burton steps that number 3 role. No attention on him whatsoever. You don't need to at this point, at least not yet. With those other 2, healthy Joe Burrow, tell me why we're not talking about them possibly giving Kansas City more for their money when it comes to just Super Bowl chances. And I know they lost some pieces offensively. They lost some pieces defensively. But Higgins is back. I think Trey Henderson now comes back. He's like, all right, Higgins is back. I think that pushes me to come back. Cincinnati, I don't want to say a team to watch out for because we all know what they're capable of. But I want to say a team to watch out for because it feels like they've kind of flew under the radar how good they actually are when Joe Burrow is healthy, taking snaps. So watch out for Cincinnati.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I've always said about Burrow is that to me is what separates him in my eyes as the number 2 because he's been able to beat Mahomes. 2 quarterbacks. Talked about this, I think, last week when we were discussing CJ Stroud's comments. 2 quarterbacks have beat Mahomes in the playoffs. Brady, no longer in the league, and Joe Burrow. There's only 2. And Burrow almost beat him again in, 2022, right? 2022. Yeah. He beat him in 2021. Almost beat him again in 2022. He's been able to get to a Super Bowl. Lamar, Allen, none of them have been able to do that. Now Jalen Hurts has. So I'll give him that. But I just think Burrow is better than Hurts personally. And if we're talking about other AFC quarterbacks, he's the only other one to beat to a Super Bowl, which is crazy to think over the last really couple of seasons with the dominance that Kansas City has had. So that's what gives me so much respect for Burrow. And yeah, I mean, the AFC North's a gauntlet, but when Burrow's on, this is easily a team when he's healthy. And when you have an elite quarterback, he can do more with less than others. Jake Browning with this roster would not do very well. But Burrow can do more with less. He could probably get more out of Jermaine Burton than many other guys would be able to. A 3rd-round receiver in year number 1. So I agree. They'll be right. I mean, the more and more I look at it, I think the AFC North, it's going to be a very difficult decision, a division. Obviously, I wrote an article about this 2 weeks ago. I think it's the toughest division in football. But the more and more you look at it, I think it's ultimately probably going to be the Steelers that are probably the odd man out in that division. And that's saying something because they might win 9 games. They might be 8-9, 9-8. Yeah. They'll be in the conversation. And they probably, I mean, unless if Watson's really bad, I don't think Russell Wilson can outplay any of the quarterbacks in that division. Unless if Watson's terrible again. If that's the case, then yeah, maybe I would take Russell Wilson. But I mean, you know for
I
a
mean,
fact, Baltimore Cincy probably T. Higgins a big deal for me. If they didn't have T. Higgins, I would feel very skeptical about Cincinnati. But now with Higgins, I think you kind of have a lot of, because you knew you had to get Tyler Boyd gone. You couldn't afford losing both of them. You split. Boyd's gone. Higgins is back. Higgins is the better of the two. So you have your 1-2 punch still in place. Good defense. Not much of a running game, but you see what you can do with Zach Moss. He had some stretches in Buffalo where he was solid. A guy that you can use a little bit in the passing game. I mean, let's be real here. Joe Mixon last season didn't. I mean,
he looked bad. I mean, you can be
yeah. I mean,
honest. He looked
his
bad.
numbers weren't. Yeah, his numbers weren't terrible. I think some of the reason maybe why he didn't look as good while watching him was when Jake Browning was out there, they ran the ball a whole lot more, and their team started to kind of figure out, like, there was that stretch to end the year where he wasn't doing much rushing wise, because when you have a backup quarterback, teams are going to figure you out. They're going to expect a run. However, he did have that big game. I believe he rushed for like over 100 the last game of the season, but he did slow down a little bit towards the end. He had like a couple weeks where he only had like 40 yards. I think that was some of the quarterbacks. So in terms of Cincy's point, like, maybe you get more out of, I mean, Zach Moss is solid. He, of course, did a solid job while Jonathan Taylor was out, So we'll see. We'll see. Any closing thoughts?
Are we talking about Cincinnati still, or just in general?
Just in general, everything.
Well, there's one more thing I'm going to get into, where I told you I was going to save it for the end. There's a guy, for some odd reason, I don't know why I'm in this one. There's the guy on his team right now who, I have a feeling by the time the trade deadline is over, he will no longer be on that team. And I'm going to let you guess it before I give it away.
The Bengals?
No, this is a general.
Just general. I thought you meant on Zach Moss's team.
No. This is
just in general.
Yes.
Can I get one hint? AFC or NFC?
NFC.
Is it? He's a big name, right?
Correct.
I want to say it's somebody on the Cowboys. I feel like maybe somebody on the Cowboys. I feel like Oz Perlman, the mind reader here. Not Cowboys. I'm going to say it's a wide receiver.
He's a running back.
He's a running back. All right, let's go through. Nobody on the Cowboys, so that doesn't matter. Devin Singletary on the Giants. He's a no-name. Devin Singlebum. He's not getting traded. No need to disrespect Devin Singletary. One of my friends made that nickname, and I thought it was funny. Devin Singlebum. So even if he goes off for 2,000 yards this year, I'm still going to call him Devin Singlebum. Saquon, potentially. We'll go back to him. Commanders, nobody really there. DeAndre Swift, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Bijan Robinson. No, is it? I'm gonna give a couple guesses here. Number one, is it Saquon?
It's not Saquon. You're getting hot in the NFC South.
I'm getting hot. Is it Bijan Robinson?
It's not Bijan. The next you're gonna guess it. You're gonna get it right on this next one.
Alvin Kamara.
Alvin Kamara. I have this feeling Alvin Kamara will not be a Saint halfway through the season next year. I feel like he's going to get traded.
I can see that.
Crazy thing again. So I wrote an article, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, kind of some bold predictions for the season. And one of those ones I was feeling was Alvin Kamara will not be a Saint and he will be traded middle of the season. Report comes out a few days ago that he's actually holding out for minicamp, looking for a new deal. So I just don't think, and I know we don't talk much about the Saints because there's not much to say, but we have mentioned how they're just a very bad team, up and down, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And Derek Carr looks like a deer in headlights when playing football.
Definitely.
Do we think during, just say, before the trade deadline, the Saints are looking pretty bad? Do we think Alvin Kamara is kind of going to go to the front office, or front office comes to him is like, hey, especially if a deal doesn't get done, we're just like, hey, we couldn't get a deal done. We're not looking too good. But you're 28 years of age. You are kind of aging a little bit. Let's go get you to a contender. That is kind of the way she thinks. Since, what do you think?
Yeah, I can 100% see that happening. I've said this a couple times. I don't think there's an NFL team out there that is like in a worse spot than the New Orleans Saints. They're in an awful spot. Maybe the Carolina Panthers, because it just doesn't seem like they're heading in the right direction ever. Like they're always in a bad spot. But their salary cap is such a dump. They're always over the salary cap. They're always being penalized. Derek Carr is not very good. Your receiving core, your offensive weapons are terrible. You have Chris Olave, and that is it. I mean, Rashid Shaheed and Cedric Wilson, those are your number 2 and number 3 receivers. That's supposed to win you more than 3 games this year, 4 games. I could definitely see Alvin Kamara, especially at the point he is in his career. This is a guy that has been in the league since 2017. He has this is his 9th year he's entering. Or no, 8th year rather. 8th year he's entering. He's played 101 games. He's got a lot of miles on his tires. Now he's only 20 years old. He'll be 29 by the time the season starts, but we know what 30 means for running backs. Once you hit 30, the decline for many start. Once you hit that year 9, year 10, year 11 range, if you're lucky enough to make it there, because we've seen a lot of great running backs not even hit that point. Now, luckily for Kamara, he's been relatively healthy throughout his career. He misses games here and there, missed 4 last year, but he hasn't had any brutal, catastrophic, like torn ACL, those type of injuries that could really slow you down. My point here is I definitely agree with you. I could see him going to the front office if the Saints are 2-6, let's say, or whatever, by the deadline, and they're going nowhere, and the season's not going well. And let's say Kamara's playing decent, and he's still good enough, still showing that he can go help contribute to playoff contender. I think Kamara's at that point in his career where he realizes he's not winning anytime soon in New Orleans. He has never won in New Orleans. He's going to want to go somewhere at this point in his career. He's going to be 29 years old. He's going to be 30 starting next season. And I think he's going to want to go to another team, try and win a championship, try and get to the playoffs, try and make some noise. At this point in his career, he might go ring chasing a little bit. He might want that a little bit. And that's why it could be, too, why he's looking for a new contract. He's kind of weighing the option of getting a massive contract from the Saints and playing that out and maybe taking the money over the rings. Or if he doesn't get what he likes from a contract, request a trade, I want rings over money, and goes to maybe a team. I mean, just right off the dome here, maybe the Bengals go and acquire him, because if Zach Moss isn't doing a whole lot, if that happens, if we nail this in June, I mean, I don't know what else needs to be said.
The team you were probably going to ask, do I have any predictions of where he might be? Obviously, we're on the same page. I'm seeing Cincinnati, which you're like, wait, hold on. So they don't want to pay Hendrickson. They don't want to pay Higgins, but then they go bring in Alvin Kamara. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense financial wise, but it makes sense for Cincinnati. I can see that happening. They can get in a situation, just say Higgins does get his deal. Sometimes by reconstruct, because they know what Alvin Kamara can bring over. So don't be surprised you see a Joe Burrow and a Jamar Chase. Certain guys kind of move some things around in their contract. It's like, let's go get Alvin Kamara. Let's instantly just become bigger threat than we already are. So I mean, especially with a guy like him, you already know what he brings to the team. He might be willing to take a lot less money because, like you just said, where it's like, do I want to ring chase and kind of don't care too much about the contract, or let me just load up on money right now because I know I'm not ever going to win anything. So Cincinnati, I like Kamara in Cincinnati, and as I'm reading here, I see a report that it wasn't necessarily he didn't show up to minicamp. He was at minicamp and left. He just walked out of the building.
He probably saw
So
Derek Carr. That was too much for him.
I mean, I can see how that can be a little frustrating. Like you want your contract, and now you're watching Derek Carr overthrow balls on air. I get it. I mean, I like the Cincinnati move. I feel like that would be a good fit for him, good fit for both sides. If we call this in June, we better be hired. ESPN better hire us.
Definitely.
Whenever the news breaks.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, from Cincy's perspective, why I think it would help too is he kind of adds what Kamara's been so good in his career. He's never had a season over 1,000 rushing yards, but his pass catching ability out of the backfield has been one of the best, really the best probably in football since he's entered the league in 2017. So from a Bengals perspective, let's say they're not getting a ton of production from their tight end, and maybe Jermaine Burton's going through it a little bit as a rookie. You can add not only a running back that provides a lot, but you're basically adding another receiver when you get Kamara. That's how good he's been. So Bengals perspective, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I could definitely see this happening. I could definitely see it. I see a team in New Orleans that is not very good. I think they're the third best team in their division. I think they're better than Carolina. They're not better than Tampa or Atlanta. They're really not like, there's no real young pieces on that team to build on other than probably Olave. And I see a team that is not very well coached. I don't really know how much Dennis Allen's going to be there, how much longer he's going to be there. It kind of feels like a stopgap for maybe somebody else to come in and really take on the rebuild. So, I could definitely see it 100%. And Bengals make a lot of sense. I mean, some other teams that potentially make a lot of sense. I don't know. I don't really know. I'd have to probably think about that.
I mean, that's the
maybe
only one.
The Cowboys.
Maybe. That's my next one. I'm thinking
right?
That's the only one I can think of if we're talking about pure contenders with a question at running back.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're talking about a team that is going to contend. And a little bit of a running back question, not too much, because Zeke probably does have a little bit of in the tank.
Yeah,
but
I think being back in Dallas will help him too a little bit.
Well, let me see. If the man who was running the Cowboys, had any common sense, going after Alvin Kamara would be something that he does. And you go a 1-2 punch with Zeke and Alvin Kamara, because if I'm being honest, I don't know who the running back 2 is right now in Dallas. It might be Rico Dowdle still, but respectfully, come on now. Let's be real. Let's be honest. That's not your Bowl as your number 1-2 punch. So you move Zeke to that second option. You go get Alvin Kamara, who again might be, kind of like, all right, I'm not really too big on the contract anymore. I just want to go win. If you're smart, if you're Dallas, you go do that.
Mm-hmm.
But Jerry Jones still runs the Dallas Cowboys. So knowing how things shape up, Alvin Kamara is probably going to the Eagles. Him and Saquon are a 1-2 punch. Because Jerry Jones isn't going to have. But
maybe the slow off season was setting up for a huge deadline. A minor setback set up for a major comeback.
I mean, if that is the case, I hope he still has his scroll notebook, and that needs to be hung on a banner in AT&T Stadium. That is how you can buy the fans back. I know there's a lot of unhappy fans just with how this offseason was handled. There's actually, I think it was ESPN, but there was an article that just came out yesterday about Dallas having the worst offseason throughout all 32 teams. So that is the kind of buy-in base that get everyone all in. And I mean, if you want to win a Super Bowl and you want to do it quick, Kamara's the way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. He's a winning move. He's an all-in move. He provides a lot. And New Orleans feels like a wasted town over there right now. Prove me wrong, but that's what it feels like. So now, any closing thoughts on the podcast as a whole?
I think we're geniuses, and we called something early like we did with Zach Wilson in Denver. So
that is
ready
true.
for football season. That's it.
I'm ready to watch Zach Wilson this season. Can't wait. Zach Wilson, practice squad, scout team quarterback. Broncos country, let's ride.
What happens when the Broncos and Raiders get flex Sunday night?
Game 272 to make the playoffs. Final wild card spot. Zach Wilson versus Aiden O'Connell.
What are we doing? We're going. And then what can
the NFL would be in a brutal spot if that's the case. I mean, what the heck happened to the AFC if those two teams are fighting for the final wild card spot? You know, they major injuries. There's probably be like 5 quarterbacks. They're the same thing as last year. If that happens, I'm knock on wood, this never happens. But if the Broncos and Raiders would have a chance at making the playoffs, and I'll say this, I think the Raiders would be competitive. But if the Broncos have a chance of making the playoffs, I think that means one of Herbert or Mahomes had to probably go down.
I would have thought
right.
I would have thought worse. I would have thought Mahomes got in the division, but
I'll say Mahomes would have to go down for that to happen because Mahomes owns Denver.
I'm saying as a whole, Mahomes got hurt. Lamar Jackson after week 4 said, "I'm done doing this." Pack the suitcase and just stop playing football. Peyton Manning came back and is now playing for the Burrow's hurt again. Going back to LSU for an NIL deal.
Yeah,
there's so many things that have to go wrong for the Broncos to even be close.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. So, I mean, just looking at their schedule, you would need Mahomes. A lot would need to go wrong for those two teams to be primetime last spot in the wild card. I can name Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Texans, Colts, Jags, Chiefs. That's 9 teams there. I would even say the Titans, the Steelers, all those teams. That's 12, 13 teams that are better than them. You would need a whole lot of help to have that happen. Well, they played the Chiefs last week of the season, so maybe that's for the division. Oh my God, imagine that. Oh my God. Imagine that's for the division. Jeez. Talk about a hangover. Super Bowl hangover would be.
My gosh.
That would
be hilarious. That would be something else.
Yeah. Anyway, that'll do it. Episode 17 in the books. We will see you back here next week talking about all the latest and greatest around the NFL. It's crazy. Was this our 3rd episode of June? No, I think this was our 2nd. Next week will be our 3rd. We have 2 more up. We're already halfway through June. Crazy. Halfway through June. July's right around the corner. Training camp's right around the corner. So a lot to be excited about. Make sure to please subscribe. We will see you back here next week. As always, thanks for watching, and see you then.